YouTube, it's Charlie from Reader Turned Writer, and today I am sharing the books that I read in July of 2021. It's just going to be a quick video. I'm not feeling the greatest, you can maybe tell from my voice, but I wanted to get on real quick because I do have books that I need to return to the library, and I wanted to do this video before I return those books. So I'll just jump right in. I read 17 books, so it's going to be, I'll try and be quick with each one. The first book I actually listened to on a car trip, King and the Dragonflies by Kacen, Callender, and I rated this 5 stars. This is one that I had heard Kelly, I'll link her channel down below. I really love her booktube channel. She talked about this and really loved it, and so I immediately put it on my list, and it's been a little while, but I finally was able to get to it and I absolutely loved it. And even though it wasn't during the week of Middle Grade Magic, the readathon, it was on my TBR for that, and I just happened to have it earlier and listened to it. And it was a really, really good read. It follows a boy after the death of his brother as he is trying to figure out who he is and struggles with identity, and it explores a lot of really in-depth topics and ideas in a way that is suitable for a younger audience, but also really meaningful for adult readers as well. And then my family and I finished listening to Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. My kids, I had read the first one aloud to them a while ago, and then we had the audiobook, so I decided to, we listened to it in the car together, and then they really wanted to listen to the second one. We had the audiobook for that as well. My younger two were not as interested in it, but my almost 7-year-old really enjoyed the book, and I'm glad that we read it. She wants to read the rest of the series, but I told her she needs to wait until she is old enough to read it on her own, because some of the later ones are a little bit scarier. On the way home on our car trip, I listened to Other Words for Home. It's about a girl who immigrates here to the US from Syria because of some of the unrest in Syria, and just goes through her journey as she tries to find her place in the world. And it's a really beautiful story. It is written in verse, but for me that didn't play as much of a part because I did listen to the audiobook. But I do love middle grade books written in verse. I do think that they flow really well and poetically. The next book I listened to is a middle grade, it's the second in the Enola Holmes series. It's called The Case of the Left-Handed Lady by Nancy Springer, and I rated this 5 stars. I enjoyed the first book, but I actually had decided I wasn't going to continue on with this series. Then I watched the, like a way long time after that, like maybe a year and a half after that or something, I watched the Netflix movie that they did of Enola Holmes and really enjoyed it, and decided that I would pick up the next in the series. And I'm really glad I did, because I absolutely loved this one. I liked it actually a lot more than the first. In this one, she just felt so capable, Enola did, and so strong and smart, and I loved seeing just her cleverness and the way that she navigated things. I just absolutely loved, I was hooked on her story the whole time. And then the first read aloud that we did with my kids was the first Cam Jansen in the series by David A. Adler, and I rated this 5 stars. I have a lot of nostalgia around Cam Jansen. I remember reading it in my school library when I was younger, and I just thought that I would read the first one with the kids. They absolutely loved it. I will probably get the second one for my oldest child to start reading when she's done with a couple series that she's in the middle of. I think that it's really well done for younger kids. It's definitely because it is targeted towards such a young audience. It's not one that I would just read on my own as an adult, but it was really fun to share it with my kids. And then I listened to The Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner, and this takes place, it's a historical fiction that takes place right after World War II, and kind of shows how a group of people use their love for Jane Austen's books to cope with some of the hard things in life. And it does follow a lot of different characters, and it's a lot more slow moving. It's very much character driven, more about their character growth and feelings than any sort of plot. But I really enjoyed it. I don't know if I would have liked it quite as much if I was sitting down to read it, because it is so slow paced, but because I was listening to it, I just felt like I really got to know the characters once I was able to keep track of who was who. Then I listened to Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator by Roald Dahl, and I rated this 2 stars. I was not impressed. I honestly did not go in with super high expectations. The reason I listened to it is because I had tried to read this aloud to my kids last year, and we all got bored and we just stopped reading it. I was having a hard time wanting to pick it up, and so I decided to listen to it because sometimes that helps me get through books that are harder to sit down and read, because I can be doing other things while I'm listening and just kind of let my mind take it in. It's a very short audiobook as well, otherwise I may not have actually finished it. There is a reason that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is a classic that everybody knows about, and that they've made movies of and everything, and that the Great Glass Elevator, that they haven't. It just felt really random to me. Like, Roald Dahl has a very specific silly type style that works well with a purpose and like his plot and the characters, but this just felt all over the place, dumb versus not as silly as much as like dumb to me, and it's definitely not one that I enjoyed. I'm not sure I'll even keep it because I do own it, but I don't think it's really worth like keeping for my kids to read or something, and I know I will never reread it. And then I read Sense and Sensibility, and I actually did end up listening to this as well. I have been rereading all of Jane Austen's books this year and absolutely loving it. I love Sense and Sensibility. My favorite is Pride and Prejudice, but Sense and Sensibility is such a good one. It's up there on my favorites list. And of course I rated it 5 stars. Prompted by the middle grade magic readathon, I actually picked up the Rithmatist. They had a challenge to read a middle grade book by an adult author, and Brandon Sanderson is primarily an adult author, but he does have a couple of middle grades, and this is one of them. I absolutely love the Rithmatist. It takes place in a world kind of like similar to a dystopian of our world, where it has like kind of similar names to some of our countries and different things. When the settlers in America showed up, they were attacked by wild chalklings, or little chalk creatures that came to life. And there are people who, in the book, who can use chalk to draw, and they have, the chalk has magical powers where like they can make shields or chalklings that can move around and different things. And the boy in the book really wants to be a Rithmatist, but he's not. And it is just so phenomenally written. I would recommend it for older middle grade rather than younger, because of just, it does get a little bit, it can get a little bit scary or creepy because of the chalklings idea, but it is so well done, and even I would highly recommend it to any adult as well. It is so good. I really hope that he writes more in the series, because he does kind of wrap up the plot line throughout, but he definitely leaves a lot open to explore in further books, and he hasn't had the chance to do that yet. And so I do know that it's still on his radar, on his list. He just hasn't done anything with it for a long time. So hopefully someday he will. And then I listened to Pay Attention, Carter Jones by Gary D. Schmidt. And this book is just about a boy who one morning a butler shows up on his doorstep kind of to work for his family. His dad is overseas, and his mom needs help with all the kids and stuff. And it's kind of about him coming to terms with some different grieving things and just his relationship with the butler. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was phenomenal. I did rate it 5 stars. Then I had a bit of a disappointing read. I read Moo by Sharon Creech. This is a book that I have owned for a while. I have really enjoyed books by Sharon Creech in the past. Especially Walk Two Moons. I absolutely loved that one. So I got this one off of Thrift Books a couple years ago, and I've been meaning to read it ever since. And I finally got to it during middle grade magic readathon, and I didn't like it very much. I only rated it 2 stars, not because there was anything wrong with it, but just because it was kind of really boring. I just wasn't interested from beginning basically to the end. There was never a time when I felt invested, or there was a part where I felt like I was supposed to feel a whole bunch of emotions, and I didn't really feel anything. I just felt kind of meh about the book the whole time. And so that was kind of disappointing to me. My reread for the month was Enna Burning by Shannon Hale. I reread The Goose Girl last year, and I've been wanting to reread the rest of the series because it's been a long time. And Goose Girl kind of straddles the line between middle grade and YA, where Enna Burning is definitely a YA book. And it continues on with the characters. It follows Enna, who is in Goose Girl, a lot more. She's the main character, but it has a lot of the same characters from the first book. And I won't say too much because I don't want to give away a lot of what happens in the first, but it just basically has a magic system where people can talk to elements or animals, or they have what's called people speaking, where different people have gifts for speaking to different elements, or like I said, animals or people. And so obviously this one's based around the element of fire, and it's a really good book. I rated it 4 stars. When I first read it as a teenager, a young teenager, I would have rated it 5 stars. I really loved this series when I was younger. As an adult reading it, it is a good book, but not like amazing. And then I listened to Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and I had a really hard time rating this, but I ended up rating it 4 stars. I think I would probably do 3.5 if Goodreads allowed that. There were parts of it that I really loved. I was really invested when the main character was a small child. I was very interested in that section. And then there's like kind of a romance section, and I was less interested in that, and there is some more explicit sex stuff, not actual sex scenes, but it is a little bit more explicit than I am normally comfortable with, but I continued reading it anyway. And then it got to a court scene, or court section, I guess, not just one scene, and I really loved the court section. I do love mystery, like murder mysteries and courts and stuff like that, and I was very interested in that section. And then the ending, at first I was really happy with the ending, but then when the book gave us some closure, I wasn't as happy with the way that all played out, and it kind of tainted the whole reading experience for me. The writing style is a lot more poetic, and some of the things that happen in the plot are maybe a little less realistic of what would happen in real life, but I was able to kind of suspend my belief and go with it, and the writing style was beautiful. It's not something that is super important to me, but it was something that I noticed. And then Brandon Sanderson had a new release with, he actually co-authored this one, and it is Lux, a Texas Reckoner's book, and it's an audio original. You do not have to read the original Stillheart series in order to read this book. You can read it without that series at all. They have like slight references to things that might happen in the Reckoner's original Reckoner series, but it's not necessary in order to read it. And they did say that they are planning on eventually releasing in print and ebook as well. It's just for now they are only through Audible. The audiobook was really well done, the book was well written, the story was really interesting, I really enjoyed the character arc. I rated it 5 stars. My Agatha Christie book for the month was A Murder is Announced. I really enjoyed it. I rated it 5 stars. It is a Miss Marple mystery. She is not in the book as much, which was a little disappointing. I've only read a couple Miss Marple books, so I don't know if that's typical for her books, but in the ones that I have read, one of them was actually from her perspective, so she was in it a lot. I don't remember the other one, but it does seem like she was in it quite a bit more. And in this one, I think I was more than a third of the way through before they even mentioned her name. And she was the one to like figure out the mystery and wrap it all up and everything, but like we followed a different kind of main detective, and saw a lot of the other characters, but it was really interesting because it was one of those mysteries where it was people are saying who they are, but you actually don't know if what they're saying is true, and so the whole time you're trying to figure out who it is that's masquerading as someone that they're not supposed to be, which is always kind of fun. And then after we finished Cam Jansen as a read aloud, because it's so short, we were able to read another one, and we actually started reading How to Train Your Dragon. the book because my kids love the movies and they also love the show Rescue Riders. Rescue Riders, it's not bad. It's just one of those kid shows where you're like, you really want to watch this one again? But it's fine. I really love the first How to Train Your Dragon movie. And they took the name and they took like some of the names and they took the premise. And that's about all they took from the book to the movie. And the book is definitely written with like a 10-year-old boy in mind. And I will just say my girls and I just weren't as interested. And so we ended up actually stopping the book. And we picked up, kind of on a whim, The Witches. It's not even on my list of books that I wanted to read with them, but I saw it at the library and I thought that they would really like it, and they absolutely loved it. So I read another Roald Dahl book this month, and this one was 5 stars because I love The Witches. And then the final book that I read is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and this is, Andy Weir wrote The Martian, which was super popular, of course, on BookTube. And I've never read his first book, Artemis or something like that. I've heard from some people that it's not quite as good, but I had heard from so many people that Project Hail Mary was amazing. So I picked it up and I loved it. This is one of my favorite books of the year so far. It was so good. Like The Martian, it has a main character who is put kind of in impossible situations and has to do a lot of problem solving using science. But the science is talked about and explained just in terms that like I feel like I can almost like, not that I could go do what he's doing, but I can follow and understand what they're talking about. And the problem solving aspect of it is really fun. And then the other similarity is that the main character also kind of uses sarcastic humor as a coping mechanism, which just makes him really likable and fun. And this one has some more mystery at the beginning. You're trying to figure out what is going on. It has some more sci-fi and alien type things in it. And it has less swearing. I felt that it was cleaner than The Martian. And overall, I actually loved it more than I loved The Martian. And I did really enjoy The Martian. So this was one of my favorite books of the year. It was just so fun. I couldn't recommend it more, even if you're not normally a sci-fi reader. So those are the books that I read last month. My 3 favorites, because I always pick 3 from each month to make it easier at the end of the year to narrow down my favorite books of the year. My 3 favorites were Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, The Case of the Left-Handed Lady by Nancy Springer, that was the second Enola Holmes book, and Lux, the Texan Reckoners book by Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, I would love to hear what some of your favorite books of the month were from last month and how your reading month went, and we can talk more about books, or if you have read any of these books and loved or hated them, I would love to hear about that as well. Don't forget to drop me a comment down below so that we can chat. If you want to follow my reading journey more closely, I do leave a review on Goodreads for every book that I read. And I also share my favorite books on Instagram. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe for lots of reading and writing content. And thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you in the next one.